The 1960s gave us some of the most iconic television shows and entertainment moments in American history. From the Andy Griffith Show to Star Trek, from the Ed Sullivan Show to Bewitched, television became the center of family life in a way that's hard to imagine today. But behind those beloved shows were some truly bizarre facts that most people never knew about. Things that seem absolutely crazy by today's standards were completely normal back then. So let's take a look at 20 weird facts about 1960s TV and entertainment that will change how you remember watching television. Fact 1. TV shows were filmed in black and white. Even after color, TV existed. Here's something that might surprise you. Even if you grew up in the 60s, many of your favorite shows were still being filmed in black and white well into the middle of the decade, even though color television had been around since the 1950s. The reason had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with money and stubbornness. Networks knew that most American families still owned black and white TV sets in the early 60s. Color televisions were expensive luxury items that cost the equivalent of several $1,000s in today's money. So producers figured, why spend extra money filming in color when most viewers couldn't see it anyway? Shows like The Andy Griffith Show didn't make the switch to color until 1965, and Perry Mason stayed black and white until it ended in 1966. But here's the weird part. Some shows filmed certain episodes in color and others in black and white during the same season, depending on their budget that week. Imagine tuning in one week to see your favorite show in vibrant color, and the next week it's back to black and white. That would drive viewers crazy today. But back then, people just accepted it as normal. The Beverly Hillbillies made the switch to color in 1965, and ratings jumped because audiences finally got to see the Clampett Mansion in all its gaudy glory. The real irony is that many families finally bought color TV sets just in time to watch their favorite black and white shows and their runs. If you were lucky enough to have a color TV in the early 60s, you probably spent a lot of time bragging about it to your neighbors. Fact 2. Cigarette companies owned most primetime shows. If you watched television in the early 1960s, you were basically watching one long cigarette commercial interrupted occasionally by actual shows. That's because tobacco companies didn't just sponsor shows back then. They literally owned them and controlled everything about them, including the scripts. Philip Morris owned I Love Lucy and made sure that Lucy and Ricky's sponsor, Philip Morris cigarettes, appeared in almost every episode. The Flintstones was sponsored by Winston cigarettes, and early commercials actually showed Fred and Barney smoking and saying, "Winston tastes good like a cigarette should." Yes, cartoon characters sold cigarettes to kids and nobody thought twice about it. The tobacco companies had so much power that they could veto storylines they didn't like. If a script called for a character to cough, the cigarette company sponsor would demand it be removed because they didn't want viewers associating coughing with smoking. Actors who refused to smoke their sponsor's brand in real life could lose their jobs. Some stars had it written into their contracts that they had to be photographed smoking only their show's cigarette sponsor. The weirdest part was that these cigarette commercials were incredibly creative and catchy. You probably still remember the jingles, even if you never smoked a day in your life. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. You can take Salem out of the country, but you can't take the country out of Salem. These commercials feature doctors and even Santa Claus promoting cigarettes as healthy and sophisticated. Everything changed in 1971 when cigarette advertising was finally banned from television and radio. But for most of the 60s, primetime TV was essentially brought to you by Big Tobacco, and nobody questioned whether that was appropriate. Fact 3. Married couples couldn't share a bed on TV. One of the most bizarre rules of 1960s television was that married couples on TV shows could not be shown sleeping in the same bed. Even if they were married in real life and playing married characters, they had to sleep in separate twin beds with a nightstand between them. The censors believed that showing a married couple sharing a bed was too suggestive and would corrupt American viewers. This created some ridiculous situations for TV writers. How do you explain why Ward and June Cleaver slept in separate beds? Or why Rob and Laura Petrie on the Dick Van Dyke Show had twin beds? The shows just never addressed it and hoped viewers wouldn't think too hard about it. In real life, married couples in 1961 didn't sleep in separate beds, but on TV, they absolutely had to. The Brady Bunch found a clever loophole in 1969 when they showed Mike Mike and Carol Brady's bedroom with what appeared to be one large bed. If you look closely, it was actually two twin beds pushed together with separate bedding. The censors approved it because technically they weren't sharing a bed. The first show to break this ridiculous rule was actually Bewitched in 1964. Darren and Samantha Stevens were occasionally shown in the same bed together, though usually only from the waist up, and always with multiple blankets between them. By the end of the decade, most shows had abandoned the twin bed rule, but for most of the 60s, American television pretended that married couples slept separately. Looking back, it's hilarious that TV censors thought twin beds were protecting American morality. These same couples were supposed to have children, but heaven forbid they sleep in the same bed. Fact 4. The word pregnant was banned from television. Here's something that sounds absolutely insane by today's standards. During the early 1960s, you could not say the word pregnant on television. It was considered vulgar and inappropriate for family viewing. Instead, TV shows had to use euphemisms like expecting in a family way or anticipating a blessed event. This became a huge problem for I Love Lucy when Lucille Ball actually became pregnant in 1952 while the show was still in production. The network initially wanted to hide her pregnancy or write her off the show, but Desi Arnaz insisted they incorporate it into the storyline. It became one of the most watched episodes in television history, but throughout the entire pregnancy storyline, nobody could say the word pregnant. Lucy was always expecting or going to have a baby. The ban on saying pregnant continued well into the 1960s. Even news programs couldn't use the word when reporting on pregnancy-related stories. Medical shows had to talk around the issue using clinical terms that probably confused more viewers than just saying pregnant would have. What makes this even more ridiculous is that television had no problem showing violence, guns, and crime dramas, but the natural biological process of pregnancy was considered too scandalous to name. Dick Van Dyke Show addressed Laura Petrie's pregnancy in the show, but always referred to it in coded language that seems laughable today. The word pregnant was finally allowed on television in the mid-60s, though networks were still cautious about when and how it was used. By the time The Brady Bunch aired at the end of the decade, Carol Brady could theoretically say she was pregnant, though the show never dealt with that particular storyline. It's hard to believe that something so normal was once considered a dirty word on television. Fact 5. TV stars had to wear green makeup. If you watched television in the early 1960s, you were looking at actors wearing some very strange makeup choices. Stars appearing on black and white television had to wear green or gray makeup on their faces because regular makeup colors didn't translate well to black and white film. Pink or beige makeup would wash out and make actors look like ghosts on screen. This meant that if you ever saw your favorite TV star in person during this era, they would have looked absolutely bizarre. Their faces would be tinted green or gray, their lips would be dark brown or black, and the overall effect would be somewhere between a zombie and an alien. But on your black and white television screen at home, they looked perfectly normal. The makeup situation got even weirder when shows started transitioning to color. Actors filming shows that aired in both black and white and color had to wear special compromise makeup that looked terrible in person, but acceptable in both formats. Some shows actually filmed scenes twice, once for black and white broadcast and once for color, with costume and makeup changes in between. Female stars had it particularly rough because the heavy stage makeup required for black and white TV was harsh on skin. Many actresses developed skin problems from wearing thick green tinted makeup under hot studio lights for hours every day. The makeup also smelled terrible and took forever to remove at the end of filming. By the time most shows switched to color in the mid-60s, actors were thrilled to finally wear normal-looking makeup. But for years, being a television star meant walking around looking like a creature from a horror movie every single workday. That's dedication to your craft that audiences never saw or appreciated. Fact 6. Game show contestants were given the answers. One of the biggest scandals in television history happened in the late 1950s and continued to impact game shows throughout the early 60s. Producers of quiz shows were caught giving contestants the answers ahead of time to create more dramatic and entertaining television. The scandal rocked the entire industry and changed how game shows operated forever. The most famous case involved the quiz show 21, where contestant Charles Van Doren was fed answers to keep him winning week after week because audiences loved him. When the truth came out in 1959, it destroyed careers and led to congressional hearings. Game show producers were literally telling contestants not only what answers to give, but how long to pause before answering to build suspense. The weird part is that this practice was so widespread that many people in the industry didn't even think it was wrong. They argued they were just creating entertainment, not documenting a real competition. Producers would coach contestants on what to wear, how to act, and exactly what dramatic moments to create. The entire thing was as scripted as any drama show. After the scandal broke, game shows had to operate under much stricter rules. Contestants could no longer be coached. Questions had to be secured in bank vaults, and independent monitors watched every taping. Shows like Jeopardy and The Price is Right that started in the 60s had to go overboard, proving they were legitimate to win back viewer trust. Even decades later, game shows from the early 60s are viewed with suspicion. Was that contestant really that smart, or were they told the answers? The scandal proved that even reality programming in the 60s wasn't always real, and television audiences learned to be more skeptical about what they were watching. Fact 7. Laugh tracks were recorded in the 1950s. Here's something creepy that you probably never thought about. Every time you heard a laugh track on a 1960s sitcom, you were listening to laughter recorded in the 1950s. That means many of the people laughing on those tracks are no longer with us. You were listening to the ghosts of audiences past every time you watched The Beverly Hillbillies or Gilligan's Island. The laugh track was invented by sound engineer Charlie Douglas in the early 1950s, and he recorded hundreds of hours of audience reactions from various comedy shows. He then created a complex machine called the Laugh Box that could play different types of laughs, chuckles, and guffaws on command. Douglas became so powerful that he was the only person allowed to operate his machine, and producers would hire him to sweeten their shows with artificial laughter. The weird thing about laugh tracks is that they worked incredibly well. Studies showed that audiences found shows with laugh tracks funnier than the same shows without them. The canned laughter told viewers when to laugh, and somehow made jokes seem funnier even when they weren't that great. It was psychological manipulation, but nobody complained because it enhanced their viewing experience. Some shows filmed before live audiences, but still added laughbox laughter to make the reactions bigger and more consistent. Other shows had no audience at all and relied entirely on Charlie Douglas and his machine full of 1950s laughter. By the mid-60s, the laugh track was so ubiquitous that sitcoms without one seemed weird and uncomfortable. The laugh tracks used in the 60s continued to be used for decades afterward. So when you watch sitcoms in the 70s, 80s, or even 90s, you were still hearing that same recorded laughter from the Eisenhower era. It's one of the strangest legacies of early television. Fact 8. Barbara Eden's belly button was banned. If you watched I Dream of Jeannie in the late 1960s, you witnessed one of the most ridiculous censorship decisions in television history. Network executives decided that Barbara Eden's belly button was too provocative for family television and demanded it be hidden in every single episode. Yes, you read that right. A belly button was considered scandalous. The show's costume designer had to create special harem pants and tops that covered Eden's navel at all times. In scenes where her midriff was exposed, flesh-colored fabric or strategic positioning made sure her belly button never appeared on screen. The network censors actually watched every episode specifically to make sure no belly button was visible. What made this even more absurd was that plenty of other shows featured actresses in bikinis at the beach, and their belly buttons were perfectly visible. But something about the exotic harem costume combined with the belly button was apparently too much for censors to handle. They claimed it was too suggestive and would lead to complaints from concerned parents. Barbara Eden herself thought the rule was ridiculous and occasionally tried to sneak her belly button past the censors as a joke. In some episodes, if you look very carefully, you can catch a glimpse before the camera quickly cuts away. The cast and crew turned it into a running gag behind the scenes. The belly button ban stayed in effect for the show's entire run from 1965 to 1970. By the end of the decade, when other shows were pushing boundaries much further, I Dream of Jeannie was still carefully concealing a body part that literally every human has. It's one of the best examples of how strange and arbitrary television censorship could be in the 60s. Fact 9. Westerns dominated every night of the week. If you turned on your television any night of the week during the early 1960s, there was a very good chance you were watching a Western. At the peak of the Western craze in 1959, there were 30 primetime Westerns on television. That's 30 different cowboy shows competing for your attention every single week. Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Rawhide, Have Gun, Will Travel, The Rifleman, Wagon Train, The Virginian, and dozens more filled the airwaves. Networks figured out that Westerns were cheap to produce since you could use the same outdoor sets over and over, and audiences couldn't get enough of them. Every network tried to create the next big Western hit, leading to an oversaturated market where most shows blended together. The weird thing about 60s Westerns is how similar they all were. They featured tough but fair cowboys, sheriffs keeping the peace, ranchers defending their land, and outlaws causing trouble. After a while, it was hard to tell one show from another unless you were a dedicated fan. Was that episode from Bonanza or the Big Valley? Did that gunfight happen on Gunsmoke or the Virginian? By the mid-60s, viewers started getting tired of Westerns, and ratings began to decline. Networks scrambled to replace them with different genres like sitcoms and variety shows. But for those first few years of the decade, Westerns were television. If you didn't like cowboys, you had very few other options for evening entertainment. The Western craze is hard to understand today when the genre barely exists on television. But for early 60s audiences, spending every evening watching cowboys and sheriffs was completely normal. It was a unique moment in television history that would never be repeated with any other genre dominating quite so completely. Fact 10. The FCC made networks kill Saturday morning shows. Saturday morning cartoons became a cherished tradition for kids in the 1960s, but most people don't know that the Federal Communications Commission almost killed them before they really got started. In the early 60s, the FCC chairman Newton Mino gave a famous speech calling television a vast wasteland and demanded that networks provide more educational programming for children. This led to one of the weirdest compromises in television history. Networks agreed to fill Saturday morning time slots with a mix of entertainment and educational content to satisfy the FCC. But what counted as educational was interpreted very loosely. Shows like The Jetsons taught kids about science and technology, sort of. Johnny Quest featured adventure stories set in different countries, which networks claimed was geography education. The real solution was networks creating shows that appeared educational while still being entertaining enough to attract viewers. This is how we got animated series based on educational concepts wrapped in adventure stories. Rocky and Bullwinkle snuck in history and literature references. The Bullwinkle show featured educational segments like Fractured Fairy Tales and Mr. Know-It-All that technically taught lessons while being primarily comedy. The FCC mandate also led to the creation of those weird educational shorts that aired between cartoon shows. Grammar Rock, which came later in the 70s, was directly inspired by the 60s push for educational content. But during the 60s, networks satisfied regulators with minimal effort while still delivering the cartoons kids actually wanted to watch. The bizarre part is that this FCC pressure actually improved Saturday morning television by forcing networks to be more creative. Instead of just airing cheap cartoons, they had to think about content quality and educational value. The compromise between commerce and education created the golden age of Saturday morning cartoons that baby boomers remember so fondly. Fact 11. TV dinners were named after a TV show. Here's a weird connection between food and television that most people never realized. TV dinners didn't get their name just because you ate them while watching TV. They were actually created as a response to the popularity of television and were designed specifically to capitalize on the TV craze sweeping America in the mid-1950s and 60s. The Swanson Company created the first TV dinner in 1953 and packaged it in trays that looked like television sets. The original dinner featured turkey, cornbread dressing, frozen peas, and sweet potatoes, all compartmentalized in an aluminum tray. The name TV dinner was brilliant marketing that tied the product directly to America's newest obsession with television. By the 1960s, TV dinners had become a staple of American life, life. Families could heat up pre-packaged meals in minutes and eat them on folding TV trays while watching their favorite shows. It was the ultimate convenience food for a generation that was reorganizing their lives around television schedules. If Bonanza came on at 8 o'clock on Sunday night, you made sure your TV dinner was ready by 7:55. The meals were absolutely terrible by today's standards. The vegetables were mushy, the meat was questionable, and everything tasted vaguely metallic from the aluminum tray. But in the 60s, it represented modern convenience and sophistication. You were eating dinner provided by science and technology while being entertained by the miracle of television. TV dinner varieties exploded during the 60s with options like Salisbury steak, fried chicken, meatloaf, and fish sticks. Swanson even created breakfast TV dinners with eggs, sausage, and pancakes, though those never caught on quite as well. The connection between television and prepared food was so strong that the term TV dinner is still used today, even though most people eat much better frozen meals and don't even own TV trays anymore. Fact 12, remote controls were called clickers because they actually clicked. If you had a television in the 1960s, your remote control was probably called a clicker, and that name came from the literal clicking sound it made when you pressed the buttons. These early remotes didn't use batteries or electronics. They used ultrasonic sound waves to communicate with the television. The Zenith Space Command remote was the most popular model in the 60s. Inside the remote were small hammers that would strike metal rods when you pressed a button. Each rod produced a different ultrasonic frequency that the TV could detect. Pressing a button made an audible click, hence the name clicker that stuck around long after remotes stopped clicking. Here's where things got weird. Since the remote used sound frequencies, other sounds could accidentally change your channels. Jingling keys, clinking coins, or even certain dog whistles could trigger your television to change channels or adjust volume. Some people's TVs would randomly switch channels when they vacuumed because the vacuum cleaner produced frequencies similar to the remote. The clicker also had very limited range and had to be pointed directly at the TV to work. You couldn't change channels from across the room or around corners. If you were lying on the couch and didn't want to sit up to point the remote at the TV, you were out of luck. The signal wouldn't work unless you had a clear line of sight. Most families in the early 60s didn't even have remote controls. They were expensive luxury items that cost extra when you bought a television. Kids were still the primary remote control in most households. Dad would yell, "Turn to channel 7," and someone would hop up to manually turn the dial. The clicker was a status symbol that separated the haves from the have-nots in the world of television viewing. Fact 13. Networks had censors on set at all times. Here's something that would never fly today. During the 1960s, television networks employed censors who would literally stand on set during filming to make sure nothing inappropriate made it to air. These censors had the power to stop production, demand script changes, and overrule directors and producers. The censors followed something called the television code, which was basically a list of things you couldn't show or say on TV. The list was incredibly restrictive and covered everything from violence to language to how much physical contact married couples could have. Censors would read every script before filming and flag anything questionable, then watch every scene being filmed to make sure actors didn't ad-lib anything that violated the code. This led to some truly bizarre situations on set. During the Andy Griffith Show, censors objected to scenes where Andy and his girlfriend were too affectionate. On Bewitched, censors monitored how much skin Elizabeth Montgomery showed and how long kisses could last. One censor famously stopped production on Star Trek because he thought Uhura's skirt was too short, even though by today's standards it was fairly modest. Actors and producers constantly battled with censors over creative decisions. Some learned to put objectionable material in early script drafts, specifically so. The censors would focus on removing those items and miss other boundary-pushing content that actually made it to air. It became a game of misdirection and negotiation. The presence of on-set censors meant that television creativity was constantly being stifled by people who weren't artists or storytellers, but rule enforcers. Many classic shows had scenes, jokes, or storylines that were cut or altered by censors. We'll never know how much better some shows might have been if creators had more freedom to tell the stories they wanted without someone watching over their shoulder with a rule book. Fact 14. Elvis Presley could only only be filmed from the waist up. One of the most famous moments in television history was Elvis Presley's 1956 appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, but CBS censors made a bizarre decision. During his third appearance, Elvis was filmed only from the waist up because his hip movements were considered too suggestive for family viewing. This waist-up censorship affected his TV appearances throughout the early 60s. Whenever Elvis appeared on variety shows or specials, producers had to negotiate with network censors over camera angles and choreography. The man revolutionizing popular music couldn't be shown dancing naturally. What made it especially absurd was that studio audiences could see his full performance, including all his hip movements. Only viewers at home were protected. This created a strange disconnect. Those attending the taping saw the real Elvis, while TV audiences received a sanitized version. Other early rock and roll performers faced similar restrictions. Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, and others all had their TV performances modified or censored. The clash between what young people found exciting and what network censors considered appropriate caused constant conflict. By the mid-60s, restrictions began to loosen as rock and roll became more mainstream. The Beatles, for example, could perform their full choreography on Ed Sullivan without censorship. Early rockers like Elvis, however, paid the price for being pioneers, having their television performances neutered. It remains one of the clearest examples of 60s TV censorship driven by older generations, attempting to control what all young audiences could see and enjoy. Fact 15. Commercials were performed live during the show. In the early 1960s, many television commercials weren't pre-recorded. They were performed live by actors while the cameras rolled. This led to unforgettable mistakes and bizarre moments that couldn't be edited out because everything aired in real time. The Flintstones even featured live commercial segments where Fred and Barney pitched Winston cigarettes between cartoon segments. Voice actors sometimes flubbed lines, coughed, or struggled with props, and viewers saw every error. Game show hosts also performed live ads during broadcasts. John Daly on What's My Line seamlessly shifted from interviewing celebrities to selling Stopet deodorant or Geridol vitamins, memorizing copy, demonstrating products, and keeping it smooth. Any mistakes, dropped items, or forgotten lines were visible to millions. Some shows integrated commercials into the story. On I Love Lucy, Lucy and Ricky smoked Philip Morris cigarettes as part of the plot, with entire storylines sometimes revolving around sponsor products. These weren't subtle product placements, they were full commercials disguised as show content. Live commercials began disappearing in the mid-60s as videotape technology allowed advertisers more control. But for years, viewers experienced the thrill of actors stumbling through commercials in real time. Bloopers, dropped props, forgotten lines, technical mishaps became legendary. It was chaotic, unpredictable television, and audiences loved it. Watching a show meant embracing the uncertainty of whether the next commercial would go smoothly or descend into hilarious disaster, making live TV in the 60s a uniquely thrilling experience. Fact 16. The Tonight Show aired in the afternoon. Here's something that confuses people today. When The Tonight Show started in 1954 and ran through the early 60s, it aired at 11:15 p.m. Eastern Time, 10:15 p.m. Central. For West Coast viewers, networks tape-delayed the show, broadcasting it at 11:15 p.m. Pacific Time, 3 hours after the live East Coast airing. Even stranger, local stations often chose their own times. In some markets, you could catch The Tonight Show at 10:30 p.m. In others, it didn't air until midnight. There was no standardized national broadcast time, so talking to friends or coworkers about the show often meant comparing completely different viewing schedules. For a brief period in the early 60s, NBC experimented with an afternoon condensed version for viewers who missed the late-night broadcast. These edited shows aired around 4 in the afternoon in some markets, offering monologues and sketches, but not the full program. The show also changed names over the decade, starting as Tonight with Steve Allen, then The Jack Paar Tonight Show, and finally, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson in 1962. Each host brought their own style, but time slot confusion remained a constant. Today, late-night shows air at standardized times with careful time zone adjustments, making it easy to know when to watch. In the 60s, however, catching The Tonight Show depended entirely on where you lived. lived and what your local station decided. A quirk of television that seems almost impossible in today's world of streaming and national broadcasts. Fact 17. TV antennas had to be adjusted for every channel. If you watched television in the 1960s, you had a special relationship with your TV antenna. Those rabbit ears perched on top of your set weren't just decorative. They had to be adjusted carefully for every channel, and finding the right position was an art. Different channels broadcast at different frequencies, so the rabbit ears needed a unique setup for each one. Channel 2 might require them fully extended and pointed northeast, while Channel 7 might need them shortened and angled west. Channel 13 could demand one ear up and one down, in a seemingly random configuration that somehow worked. Adjusting the antenna often became a family activity. One person stood by the TV holding the rabbit ears, while someone on the couch shouted directions. Move it left! A little higher? No, back where it was. Once the picture cleared, the holder had to stay put, or the signal would disappear, leaving many kids stuck in awkward positions for the duration of a show. Weather played a huge role. Rain, storms, or wind could ruin reception, and outdoor antennas often needed manual repositioning. Summer evenings sometimes brought distant channels from hundreds of miles away. Families experimented with signal boosters, aluminum foil, coat hangers, even touching the antenna itself. Every TV was different, and everyone had their own theories on improving reception. It was frustrating, time-consuming, and occasionally magical, but adjusting rabbit ears was simply part of the television experience in the 60s. Fact 18. Movies edited for TV were completely rewritten. When Hollywood movies came to television in the 1960s, they weren't just edited, they were often completely rewritten. Networks cut entire scenes, changed dialogue, and sometimes filmed new scenes with different actors to remove content deemed inappropriate for TV audiences. Violent scenes were shortened or removed. Mild profanity was redubbed with clean language, often resulting in comical mismatches between actors' lips and the words heard. And love scenes were trimmed to a few seconds, leaving viewers confused when characters suddenly jumped from first kiss to marriage. Some films were so heavily edited that their plots barely made sense. 2-hour theatrical releases were cut to 90 minutes or less to fit TV slots with commercials, erasing key plot points, obscuring character motivations, and sometimes changing endings entirely. Widescreen films were cropped for television's square screens, often cutting important action at the edges. Pan and scan tried to follow the action, but frequently failed, leaving viewers seeing reactions without context or missing crucial parts of a scene. Color films shown on black and white TVs lost much of their visual impact. Movies like The Wizard of Oz, which relied on color to tell the story, had their transitions reduced to mere visual notes. Networks sometimes added announcements highlighting color broadcasts, encouraging viewers to watch at friends' houses with color TVs. Television in the 60s transformed Hollywood films into a strange hybrid, often unrecognizable from the originals, leaving audiences to navigate confusing edits, lost visuals, and altered stories, all in the name of family-friendly viewing. Fact 19. TV Guide was the most read magazine in America. During the 1960s, TV Guide was America's best-selling magazine, outselling Time, Life, and Reader's Digest. Every household with a television subscribed because without it, you had no idea what was on or when. It was considered as essential as the TV itself. Arriving weekly in your mailbox, TV Guide offered complete programming schedules for every local channel. Sundays were spent planning the week around must-see shows, circling favorites, and resolving schedule conflicts. Families negotiated who got to watch which program when shows aired opposite each other. But TV Guide was more than a schedule. It featured celebrity interviews, behind-the-scenes stories about popular shows, and the famous cheers and jeers section, praising or criticizing programming. Its opinions carried weight. If TV Guide panned a show, it might not last long. The cover was a coveted milestone for stars. Being featured signaled you'd made it in Hollywood. Studios competed for cover spots during season premieres or special episodes. TV Guide's predictions often became self-fulfilling prophecies because viewers trusted its opinions. Millions of Americans planned their lives around TV Guide. There were only a handful of channels, and missing a week meant being completely lost about what to watch. Today, on-screen guides and streaming services make browsing effortless, but nothing replaced the ritual of sitting down with TV Guide, circling programs, and plotting your weekly TV schedule. Fact 20. Test patterns played music all night. Here's something young people today find baffling. Television didn't run 24 hours a day in the 1960s. After the late movie or late show ended around 1 or 2 in the morning, stations would sign off for the night, resuming programming around 6 or 7 the next morning. Before signing off, stations played the national anthem with footage of American flags waving. Then the screen switched to a test pattern, a geometric design used by technicians to calibrate TVs. That test pattern stayed on all night, often accompanied by a high-pitched tone or sometimes music. Some stations played classical music, others patriotic songs or elevator music, and a few broadcast nothing but the steady beeping tone, which could drive viewers crazy if they fell asleep with the TV on. The most common design, the Indian head test pattern, featured a Native American head surrounded by circles, lines, and shapes. Anyone awake late at night or working overnight became very familiar with these patterns. Kids who fell asleep watching TV often woke up to the test pattern and wondered if something was wrong. Parents quickly learned to turn off the TV after shows ended to avoid the annoying tone. For night owls, insomniacs, or overnight workers, the test pattern became a strange, constant companion until morning programming resumed. The idea of a TV station sleeping seems impossible today with endless streaming and 24/7 channels. But in the 60s, even television needed to rest. The 1960s were a fascinating era for television, full of bizarre rules, odd technical limits, and decisions that seem downright crazy today. From censors banning belly buttons to laugh tracks recorded before some viewers were even born, TV in the 60s was full of strange quirks most people never knew about. These rules shaped the shows we loved, yet somehow, creative and memorable programming still emerged. Writers, actors, and producers constantly found ways to work around censorship and technical restrictions, delivering the entertainment that defined a generation. If you grew up watching 60s television, things like separate beds for married couples or adjusting your antenna for every channel felt normal. Today, they seem like relics from another world. Share any weird 60s TV facts I might have missed in the comments, and don't forget to sign up for the Recollection Road newsletter in the description.